All right, everyone. No frills tonight. Let's get down to business because we got two semifinal games to be played the next two nights. That would be Thursday and Friday. Ole Miss and Miami coming up on Thursday, and of course, Indiana and Oregon, the All Big Ten semifinal. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football for the College Football Show late night, presented by FanDuel. And of course, we're going to check out the odds that you can find on FanDuel in particular. Ole Miss, 3.5-point dog to Miami. Both those teams, of course, survived the previous matchups as underdogs. Please check out what I posted a couple days ago. We did the complete matchup between Ole Miss and Miami and Oregon and Indiana in terms of national rankings. We went through all the aggregate rankings, the efficiency rankings, and we also took common opponents. We looked at those. We also looked at the PFF, the Pro Football Focus matchups of the individuals on both sides of the ball for these teams. Should not be surprising that Miami is a favorite at 3.5 points. Also, Pro Football Focus deems them a pretty significant decided better team when you add up the offense and the defense in terms of the PFF grades. And however, Ole Miss and their PFF grades certainly don't match up against Georgia, and the same thing with Miami against Ohio State. So throw all that out in regards to it's fun to talk about. Does it mean something? Of course, the better players have the better PFF grades, and the better teams typically have the better national rankings. But when the teams are this good, they're obviously going to lay it all out there on the field. And we saw Ole Miss come back from a loss earlier in Athens against Georgia to get the job done in the fourth quarter this time around. We got Trinidad Chambliss, who is one of the most exciting quarterbacks in college football, put up a 362 passing number against Georgia. And, of course, the Rebels were down by as many as 2 scores in that game against the Bulldogs and came back and won the game in the fourth quarter. And Chambliss was pretty darn ridiculous as an improv quarterback against that Georgia defense. Now, the Georgia defense is nothing to sneeze at. They righted some wrongs at mid-season after they gave up some big point totals against Ole Miss and Tennessee and a few others and really locked in late in the season. So Georgia came in hot and playing sound defense, and Ole Miss lit them up pretty well. They've got capable receivers. Trey Wallace had a huge game, the former Penn State wide receiver. Huge game against Georgia in the quarterfinal. And, of course, Keywan Lacey's one of the best backs in college football, 5 yards per carry, 23 touchdowns from one Keywan Lacey. So I do a little set maintenance there. Comments, questions are welcome, of course, there in the chat. And, of course, we will take your calls. The call-in line is there in the chat as well. You can watch us on X. You can watch us. No, we did not actually include the X link. That's actually a good thing because I was going to tell those people on X that we were going to cut off the feed here very soon. But it's already gone. So hopefully everyone got the notifications. Let me know if you get the notifications. And what I mean by that is when you subscribe to the channel. And I would hope everyone that's watching either live or watches the record is subscribe right here at the Voice of College Football, that you hit the bell for the notification to know when we go live. We've got 3 games to play in college football. Let's savor it. As was mentioned by our guy, Tony Gerdeman, on the Ohio State show today, as we were, and I recommend watching the Ohio State show, Buckeye fan or not, because, of course, we went through the brutal loss against Miami and the disappointing end to the season. But then we really went into a number of college football topics and how much this game has changed over the last 5 years. And there are 2 major changes, obviously, and we're talking transfer portal and NIL. But because of those 2 major changes, so much around that has been impacted. And most of it to the negative, I think we would agree. Most of it has impacted the fan negatively in regards to allegiance and loyalty to the team. But once we turn the TV on and we see players running out onto the field, and toe meets leather. And there we go. As long as we get capable matchups, and we're not watching Tulane play Ole Miss and James Madison play Oregon, we're watching capable, strong, talented, mainly future NFL players on the same field. It then takes us back to yesteryear because the product on the field is still really exciting, really good. It's not the NFL. It's not the NFL. It does not compare to the NFL in regards to quality of football, but you put the name brands together with the pageantry, the tradition, and the feel of holiday football, playoff football, postseason football. And I'll even extend that out to what I took away from some of the bowl games that were semi to a high degree of legitimate, meaning Vanderbilt and Iowa, Illinois and Tennessee, a few of the other games, BYU and Georgia Tech. I enjoyed thoroughly. The game is still the game, and the game is still the game, and the game is the reason why we're talking here tonight with no football on tonight and 24 hours away, or about 20 hours away, I guess, from the first semifinal, is that we still love the game. We still enjoy the game of football, and we still enjoy rooting for our teams. And I don't know of an industry, I don't know of one that has all the corporate level influence and ownership and authority and control is probably the best word. Money everywhere, everybody getting paid a zillion dollars, billions and billions of dollars, and all this in play, and then just this chaotic mess of semi-regulations. Some get enforced, some don't. Look the other way here, enforce that, discipline them, but not them. And all of it's just a wild, wild west. But it is what it is. It's a dysfunctional mess. But when Miami and Ole Miss step on the field on Thursday night, it's probably going to be an entertaining, intriguing product. We'll take the first call here. But before we do, we got Adam chiming in with this. Mark, Carson Beck, and the would-be stars Hakeem Messidor and Ruben Bain have no class. Beck, a.k.a. Drew Aller, is not leading Miami to any victory. Ole Miss grinds down Miami's defense and seals it late with a touchdown pass, 27-21. Well, sir, I have not officially made my prediction on this game. However, Hakeem Messidor and Ruben Bain are not imposters. I will tell you that. And I believe that Ryan Day and the Ohio State offensive line would tell you that they are not imposters. Julian Sain would tell you that those two cats are not imposters. They are for real. This Miami football team has basically fulfilled its potential. They still have 2 games to play, but they are about as good as I possibly could have expected them to be this year. I didn't necessarily believe in this team, trust in Mario Cristobal, trust in even Carson Beck throughout much of this situation, this season leading up to this point, but they have made a believer out of me. And I will say finally that if the final score is 27-21, I think that Miami actually would feel good about that score, that they would feel good about that score. The over-under is 52.5. 52.5 is the over-under. Consider that Miami, in its 2 playoff games, scored a combined 13 and then 38. And then Ole Miss is obviously playing a much different brand of football because they want that thing to get ramped up. They want tempo. They want points on the board. They want out of control. And of course, there were 73 points on the board, Ole Miss and Georgia, after they put up 78 in their first matchup. 2 different types of styles. Styles make fights. Should be interesting. Ole Miss And Miami. And before we take this call, I will say one other thing. It's anecdotal, but as I think about running quarterbacks, or quarterbacks in this case that are capable of running, Chambliss is a great passer as well. Running against an NFL front, the improv game is probably not going to work in his favor over the course of 3.5 hours. Is he going to make some plays? Probably, most certainly. But the running and the risk reward and the running around and circling back 10, 15 yards behind the line of scrimmage, like he pulled off like 3 times in the fourth quarter against Georgia, most likely is going to burn he and his teammates. Just saying. The risk reward factor there, he's going to have to be he's going to have to walk a thin line of being playmaker and game manager. Can't play like a fool, can't run around throwing the ball across the field constantly. Has to pick his spots, and that just comes from feel of the game. That's just knowing your reads, knowing your indicators, knowing your keys on defense, and then in the split-second decision part of it, just having that instinct of knowing what to do and what not to do, and leaning toward safety, leaning toward I'm going to tuck it and run, leaning toward I'm going to throw it away, and not leaning toward, you know what? There's a dude over there, and there's 3 guys between me and him, but I think I can get it there. Although you can't take that away from him either, because that's probably going to, in spurts, in the right situation, going to win Ole Miss the game. I'm not predicting an Ole Miss win, but if they do win, Chambliss is going to make ridiculous plays. Yes, but he can't rely on that all night. We got the real MVP showing up tonight.
Hey, Mark, how you doing this evening?
I am doing just fine. How are you?
I'm doing well. I think Ole Miss and Chambliss, he's the best quarterback remaining in the tournament. So
Yes.
I think Miami's got the best lines on both sides of scrimmage. So I do think they're going to pressure him, particularly late in the third, early fourth quarter. They're just going to wear out Ole Miss. And I want Ole Miss to win, not because they're an SEC team. It's just because they've never won anything before, whereas Miami's had, similar to Indiana, Oregon. Oregon's had a lot more success in college football than Indiana, so I'm rooting for an Indiana Ole Miss national championship game. And then at that point, I know Ole Miss won something back in like back in like World
1960.
War
Yeah.
II. Yeah, exactly, the prehistoric days of college football. But no, they won it before the AP poll. I'm pretty sure even was out.
They may have. I believe that Ole Miss is the 1960 AP champion. I'll double check on that.
Okay, because I'm okay. Well,
60
anyway,
or 61.
it's a ridiculously long time for them to win anything, and it would be funny for Lane Kiffin and just him being dejected and all that stuff. And I feel bad for the players at Ole Miss and the staff that kind of got absolutely screwed throughout this entire process. So it would be nice to see them go pretty far in the tournament. But I have no problem with anyone left in the tournament. And I don't know if that's a good or bad thing for the sport, that there's not any real rooting interest left in the tournament. There's not a villain, because every great story needs a villain, and we don't have one.
I would agree with that. And just to set the record straight, and I'm a bit embarrassed that I didn't quite zero in on this because I knew this. 1959, 60, 62 are Ole Miss's claimed at national championships under the great Johnny Vaught, who, of course, has his name on the stadium, and you would if you won 3 national championships at Ole Miss. But that was about roughly 7, 8, 9 years before Archie Manning. But they won those national championships there. I believe only one of those is an AP national championship. So obviously, I doubt if anyone listening, watching anything here was around for that. But yeah, you're right. There's really no, okay, let's tear down the dynasty of Nick Saban or Notre Dame or anything like that. Yeah. Oregon has won the most recently of the four. They have been the most recent, just winner, consistent winner, elite program. It's not even really close. They are by far the most successful program still playing after the last 15 years. Miami, of course, has the national championships from an era gone by, and Indiana by far is the low of the low. And of course, I'm rooting for a rematch of the 2020 Outback Bowl, which would be Ole Miss and Indiana. No, I don't know that I'm rooting for anything in particular. I would say if there's a nemesis or a villain in this, the villain would be either Lane Kiffin, who's not participating, but that makes Ole Miss the darling, the one to root for because they've been treated so poorly, the players. And it would be a great story if they were able to pull it off. So people would be laughing at Lane Kiffin, or the villains Miami, just for those people that remember them being villains of college football way back when.
All right. Particularly, it'd be pretty embarrassing for Notre Dame fans arguing they needed to be above the playoffs ahead of Miami, and Miami goes on to be in the national championship game. I know we shouldn't retroactively look at things like that, but that is still pretty funny.
Well, yeah. Yeah, I think you can make an argument either way, and I certainly do when there are decisions made prior to playoffs that obviously the people in play only had that information to work off of, but that the playoffs themselves somewhat justify the selection. And for Miami, it has been justified. Now, that doesn't mean Notre Dame should have been left out. Maybe Alabama should have been left out. And Notre Dame would, in a sense, look good at the end of all of this by stating that that they played Miami closer than anyone else that lost to them.
That
Of
is
course,
true.
I guess Louisville and SMU could say, you know what? Hey, we beat the national champions.
Yeah, Louisville's currently got the best win in all of college football, and it's not particularly close either. Did anybody think that at the beginning of the season, Louisville would have the best win in all of college football?
You don't think Indiana does?
No, I mean, Louisville went to probably a team that's going to be in the national championship game and won at their home field. I think that's slightly more impressive than going in a neutral field and beating up Ohio State by 3.
No, I'm talking about Indiana going to Oregon and winning by 10.
Yeah, no, I think Miami is better than if they win this round, they would be in the national championship game. Oregon would not. Therefore, Miami at the end of the season is going to be ranked 3 or 2, whereas Oregon's going to be ranked around 4. So I think the Miami win. And also, it's also on the road. So it's an argument, but I think the Louisville win over Miami is the best win of the season.
Well, the Indiana wins on the road as well.
True. But as
And
I
it was
said previously, Miami's
more
going to be ranked.
convincing fashion.
Huh? They did. True.
In more convincing fashion.
Absolutely. But Miami's going to end up higher ranked at the end of the season. That's almost undisputable at this point.
Yeah. That to me splitting hairs, but I think maybe the entire last 30 seconds of this conversation is splitting hairs.
That's all we do as college football fans is split hairs, Mark.
Well, yeah, that's what we're resigned to do at times, for sure.
Yeah, no, I was listening to your show last night about Tim. With Tim, after I should have stayed on to address Tim's point. My point was for him, just in case he's somehow listening or anybody wants for the conversation lesson, is not that USC is a terrible team or anything like that, and that they're representing is horrible for the Big Ten. It's that we really don't know the capability of USC's football against a TCU team. But my point is also that if Missouri losing a bunch of their players against Virginia doesn't count because Missouri lost a ton of players and it's 4-4, whereas Virginia 7-1, then I'm going to use that same standard for USC against TCU. That's the only point I'm making. And it sounds like Tim agrees with me that the bowl games don't really matter that much. And if that's true, then the SEC is clearly the best conference in college football, because I redid some of the numbers because, I was counting some of the games wrong, Mark, and the SEC is 13-13 against Power 4 opponents this year. The Big Ten, 10-11, Mark. 10 and 11. The SEC is the only conference 500 in college football against the other three conferences that are Power 4. So,
did you add up the other two?
Yes, I forgot to add the Indiana, Alabama, and the Oregon, Texas Tech result.
No, but I'm talking about the other two conferences.
Yes, they're not even close. They're non-factors. They're just so far in the.
Go ahead.
They're so far in behind, it's not even close. Like, I know some people say the American Conference is closer to the ACC than the ACC is the Big 12. Now, that's ridiculous and preposterous, but the ACC as a conference at whole is a distant fourth. The Big 12 is a distant third. The Big 10 is second, a close second, and then the SEC is one. That's the way it's going to end up, and that's the way your rankings will end at the end of the year. Assuming the results play out as they should.
Well, DeReal, I'm glad that you did this work for me, and you've already produced my video. But yeah, we'll delve into it. We will delve into it. Yeah.
No, I mean, you know how it is.
And for anyone that's trying to do the math out there that's not taking Notre Dame into account, that's why practically all the conferences can be under 500 against Power 4 opponents. It's because Notre Dame obviously went 10-2. Therefore, that's an 8-game under 500 composite record for the other three conferences, or for the 4 conferences.
That is correct. The Big Ten has 2 losses against Notre Dame, that being USC and Purdue. The SEC only has 1 loss against Notre Dame, that being 0-8 Arkansas, losing like 56-7 against Notre Dame way back in September. But those aren't
13 to be exact. But
oh wow, they still got railroaded up and down.
Sure.
I wanted to ask you, how many more viewers do you think we're missing out on? If this was Georgia Ohio State, what would the viewership do you think of that game would be versus Miami Ole Miss? Because I think it's about 10 to 20 million people that we're missing out on. I think this could legitimately have been the highest rated football game, maybe in the history of the sport, if Ohio State played Georgia tomorrow.
Well, I have not looked at the TV numbers, except for I have not intentionally gone out to look at the TV numbers. And that's another project, of course, I will take on during the off season. But I know that a few hit me in the face, like the Rose Bowl number with Indiana and Alabama. And that is the one game that causes me to pause on your statement, because who in the world watches Indiana play football? Now let's be honest, everyone. Indiana's a great story. They're probably the best football team in the country, but people don't watch them play football. Now maybe they're starting to, and that's evidenced by the Rose Bowl. And of course, Alabama brought a huge television audience as well, especially considering that Alabama at one point this season, late in the season, had the best TV numbers of anybody in college football. And that may have held up for the entire season. I don't know. But regardless, they're in the top 2 or 3. But that Rose Bowl number with a 38-3 score, which is crazy, was, I don't know, the best Rose Bowl number since fill in the blank. I don't know. But I know that it was huge. So that's the only thing that causes me to pause on Miami and Ole Miss not drawing a crowd.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to draw that big. I don't think they're even going to do as well as the Miami-Ohio State game, to be honest with you. But if it was Ohio State-Georgia playing, and this is the bad side of having playoff games, is we are kind of robbed of one of the best matchups maybe in the history of the sport. You have the 2 best programs with 2 of the 3 best coaches, with 2 of the 3 best rosters going at it in this round. And instead, let's be honest, I felt like, man, there hasn't really been this much hype around this Miami Ole Miss matchup. Instead, all of the attention, all the hype has gone to an Oregon Indiana matchup that's already been played. And I'm confused as to why that's the case.
Yeah, I can't really understand it either, because you've got an SEC team. You've got a team that has some level of Cinderella status because, number one, as you just mentioned, they haven't won anything in forever, way before anybody's memory banks. And then also you get this Lane Kiffin situation where they're gaining a level of sympathy for just being this patchwork, throw it together, coaching staff, and we don't know who's going to coach us, and they're getting it done. Versus Miami returning to prominence for the first time since 2002, and with some star power there with Carson Beck and guys that even fringe college football fans are starting to recognize because they've been such great players. Reuben Bain and Malachi Toney, Mark Fletcher are becoming stars in the sport, that I would think that there would be some allure to that, a high level of allure to that, but it also seems like a very odd matchup. And I don't know that that's not bad. It just, and maybe that's just striking me a certain way, that it seems like a very strange matchup for a draw, to draw a crowd.
Do you think it's partially because of the seating and how people just presumed the bracket was going to go, and people really hadn't had time to anticipate this matchup is why it's odd? Because I agree with everything you're saying, by the way. I just don't know why.
And if you want to take it past that, and we're probably getting past the type of people that are on the fence of watching college football playoff games, but it should be an intriguing matchup from a stylistic standpoint, like I addressed before I took your call, because Ole Miss is the high-flying team, the quarterback who's going to run all over the place, has a cannon for an arm, and Miami's the conservative, punchy in the gut, maul you with an offensive line and defense. So it's stylistically, if Ole Miss is sturdy enough to at least make it a bit of a stalemate in the trenches and at least hold up, they don't have to win, then it should be a really entertaining game.
Oh, I think so too. And I'm really confused as why the Ole Miss quarterback shambles. He hasn't elevated to that Diego Pavia level of stardom throughout the sport. He's got a great story. He's flashy. He plays in the best conference in all of college football. He makes unbelievable plays. He's got a team and a style that's geared to him. He's got an unprobable story. And he doesn't feel like he's broken to the mainstream culture.
I would agree.
I would say I was going to say, I think he's even less popular than Frank Mendoza.
Yeah, so
who's
I
a
would
system
agree
QB.
in your assessment of we might be stepping on each other because there's kind of a lag possibly. But anyway, yeah, I would agree with your assessment based on what I see out there. But I think we got to consider a few things. Number one, Diego Pavia runs his mouth, so that gains a level of attention. And number two, Diego Pavia, because he hit the scene last year, off seasons are really big in college football. They are really big for hype and momentum. They're the longest off seasons. There are more rankings that come out because it's just a rankings oriented mindset that college football fans have, that we got to rank everything because we have Heisman rankings. And obviously the very nature of the sport has been to rank teams to determine a national championship forever. That the off season, I think, the hype train in college football is very important, and obviously benefited Pavia, and he was out there talking about himself all the time. You know, I made a comment to a Vandy 247 sports writer that we had on our Iowa show, and I said, Diego Pavia might not be the biggest star in college football, but he is certainly the biggest star on his team relative to everybody else on the team. Nobody else knows anybody else on the team, and he is just kind of carries the program. But those are the only things that I can come up with that would answer your question.
No, and I think those are all valid reasons. The final thing I'll ask about is, with the season, I have to ask you about next year despite this year because we got the worst sport and calendar in all of sports. I saw Texas Tech is trying to reload once again with getting a bunch of number one players out of the transfer portal. Is there anything Texas Tech can do on the field that would make your average football fan believe in them, given what's happened to them this year? and the Big 12 in general?
You might be able to come up with an example that I'm searching for right now of teams that have in any sport that because of playing in a weak division, a weak conference, fill in the blank, that and failing in playoff situations that until they prove it on the field, regardless of the personnel additions, nobody's going to believe it. So we just put Texas Tech in that category that they need to, if they're as good as they were this year versus the Big 12, and that's only being maybe added to now, that aside from injury, aside from just complacency, they will run that league again next year, but nobody's going to pay too much attention on a national scale because they're going to just figure that they're going to get blown out in the playoffs. So they're going to have to prove it against somebody of worth out of the Big Ten or the SEC. And I'm also guessing that they play no one in the non-conference.
Correct. Do you think, though, and this, to give your example, this happens basically every year with the NFL. Most recently was with Sam Darnold and the Minnesota Vikings last year. They went 14-2 entering the final week of the season.
Okay.
Had a chance to be the number 1 seed, and because Sam Darnold was their quarterback, nobody believed in them. Everyone was like, well, we got to see what they do against the Lions, who were also 14-2. The Vikings lost that game. They had a home playoff game against the Rams, I believe it was. Sam Darnold looked atrocious, and it's like, oh, they were 14-4, ended up the season. They were a Q story, but no, they actually didn't have a realistic chance. It's more of a player thing in other sports than a whole team or conference thing or a division thing like in other sports. But just to ask, do you think that's healthy for the sport that Texas Tech could probably go 13-0, win every game by 30 points, and they probably won't be the number 1, 2, or 2 team in the country just because of what's happened in the past? Because it's so pervasive now that the Big 12 is just an island of misfit toys. I honestly don't see how they get out of it without winning a big-time matchup.
Yeah, so this might be the worst of both worlds. Not the best of both worlds, the worst of both worlds for the Big 12. If they in fact have a paper tiger at the top that runs roughshod over the league and takes away any value that many football fans put in the Big 12, which is every game's a toss up. We don't know what's going to happen. TCU goes from nowhere to first place. Other teams have gone from nowhere to somewhere, and
Arizona State 2024.
Arizona State, 3-9 to the college football playoff. If you take that element away from the Big 12 and it just becomes Texas Tech is better than everybody else, and it's not even close. And on top of it, you do not remove, which you can't against a schedule that I just checked out, has Oregon State as the marquee matchup in their non-conference schedule. Then the national scene is going to pay no attention to the Big 12 or Texas Tech. And even Big 12 fans or people that typically would just be drawn to Big 12 football as exciting are going to be steered away from what draws them in. And that's the unpredictability of the playoff race, of the conference championship race.
Right. And I've seen this narrative float around there, and I think it's actually somewhat true. Is first, the G5 teams are going to be eliminated and not get an auto bid. And then next, the Big 12s that longed for their auto bid removed. How many years of Texas Tech getting hammered in the playoffs do you think it would need to be for us having a conversation? Well, the Big 12 just doesn't have that caliber of team that should get an automatic bid into the playoffs every single year.
Well, in previous iterations of this alliance between these four and at the time 5 major conferences, I would have told you it would take a long, long time because there seemed to be more partnership between the 5 conferences. They split everything equally and they did things as partners. Now they don't. The SEC and the Big Ten has run off by themselves, not just figuratively and not just financially and in terms of popularity and talent. But they have literally said, we are going to form our own alliance and we'll be off in this corner in this boardroom making decisions for the sport, and we'll let you know where we stand. And then on top of that, obviously, in this new iteration of a playoff going from 4 teams to 12, the SEC and the Big Ten bullied the other ones to say, you don't get an equal split anymore. This is what the split is going to be, whatever it is. It's like, 29% for each one of them, and it's only like 16 or 14% for the other two. So that leads me to believe that the SEC and the Big Ten are basically more cutthroat than they've ever been, and see this more as a business and less as a collegial alliance and partnership to do what's best for the sport. And they will put anyone that they believe is not, and you just listen to the rhetoric from Tony Petitti and Greg Sankey about future iterations of the playoffs, and it's all leaning in their direction as just an assumption that they're better, and it doesn't even need to be proven on the field during the course of the season, but it needs to be put into a format. So yeah, I can see that happening. Absolutely.
Right. Now, do you think this is something that would be officially written down, or do you think it's kind of an unspoken rule? Because for me, if we go, I think we're going to 16 next year. I think that's pretty much set in stone by anybody who's paying attention. I think it's very possible a 9-3 SEC team gets in over a 12-1 BYU team or a 11-2 Utah team. Same thing for the Big Ten this year, by the way. USC is an example to flop them with Utah. And I just wanted to ask you, do you think that's healthy for the sport overall? Is we're basically de facto eliminating a conference without actually killing them off? Do you think that's healthy for the sport? Because that seems like the path we're going down.
Well, it's not healthy for the sport because there is a perceived and a legitimate disparity where we've always known that the group of 5 is the group of 5. And just because they participate in the sport and they've pulled off a handful of crazy upsets over the course of 2 decades, it's kind of cute to allow Boise State or somebody to show up to play one game and then we'll see you, but we include you. But the Big 12 is supposed to be part of this. They are a full-fledged member of the power conference structure and have had the likes of Oklahoma and Texas leading the conference very recently. So it's not good to have this obvious disparity in levels of play and then proceed with a format that only backs that up, that we do not play an equal sport. These leagues are not treated equally, and they are not equal. No, I don't think it's good for the sport.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of college baseball. I know you covered that in the 90s, where it's just always presumed that the SEC is so significantly better than everyone else. And most years they prove it, but they do have a down year too. But they'll have teams that are like 14-16, 13-17 make the tournament comfortably because it's just presumed that they're that much better than literally every other conference. And I think we're basically seeing this iteration happen to college football with the SEC and Big Ten. Whereas you're going to have 8-4 teams get in the playoffs over an 11-12 or even 12-1 Big 12 team going forth. And final thing I'll say, Mark, is if you're a Florida State administrator, you're looking stupid right now because you wanted out of the ACC and wanted to go to the Big 12. Why? Why would you have done that? That's probably the worst decision you could have made. You're going to a conference with basically no hope for like the next 10 years. But anyway, I'll get going, Mark. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Appreciate it. Let's get to a couple of super chats before we take Adam's call. This is the late night college football show right here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate all of you stopping by. Never take for granted anybody's going to show up to these shows. So whether it's 1 or 50 or hopefully someday we'll get back to 500, 1,000, something in that range. Do appreciate you being here to talk college football with me and with each other. Let me get to these super chats here. we've got Jim stopping by. Jim, we appreciate you. Thank you for the contribution. Hoping my Hoosiers somehow pull out a W after reading the chat. Happy New Year, Mark. I don't know what's going on in the chat, but I would guess that most of the chat's rooting for IU. I know that we've got a big Big Ten contingent, and most of us have a soft spot for an underdog and for a Cinderella story. And then on top of that, you've got the other Big Ten opponent being Oregon. And does your guy in the wool Big Ten fan actually consider Oregon a Big Ten team? Now, of course, technically they are as Big Ten as Michigan or anyone, but that's been in the conference since the beginning of time. But you know what I mean? Like it took a while for Nebraska to even take hold and for Big Ten fans to really think of Nebraska as a Big Ten team, or certainly Maryland and Rutgers. So I would think most Big Ten fans are rooting for Indiana. Also, probably because their team has been beaten, kicked in the head by Oregon a number of times. So that's what I would think. Maybe that's a good poll to throw up there. Who's actually backing these teams? The Ole Miss Miami thing aside, and I'm talking about obviously non-Ole Miss fans and non-Miami fans. I would think that people are siding Ole Miss just because this story with Lane Kiffin and just the ludicrous situation of a football team in a mega multi hundreds of millions, $billion industry is playing a football game, the biggest game of the year, national semifinal, and its coaching staff is in limbo because there's no regulation on the sport. Ridiculous. Okay, Adam, thank you so much for the contribution. We'll get to your call in 2 seconds. There is no way, Beck. I'm determining why Beck needs to be put in quotes. Okay, anyway, I'll get out of my English mode here. Mark, there is no way Beck brings Miami a title. He is a game manager at best. Do we start to name game managers who have won national championships? Jake Coker. Struggles to read defenses and lacks mobility. Lacks mobility. Yeah, he's not Lamar Jackson. He's not Michael Vick, but he burned Ohio State a few times. So he knows, at least unlike Julian, saying when to take off. And he gave the contrast between Julian Sayin knowing situational football and situational. When we think of situational football, obviously that's up to the coaches to determine that, what situation, what they need to do in that situation. But the quarterback needs to determine, and I'm not saying it's easy because it's not easy. You got bodies flying all over the place. You got guys leaning on you. You got hungry defensive ends chasing you down, all of that. And it needs to be decided like that. And what always has impressed me with high-level quarterback play is when they first started to go to the high overview camera shot from behind the offense. What, about 10 years ago, they started to do that first in the NFL. And you would get a look at, and obviously when that ball is just coming out of the quarterback's hands, he's made his decision. So he's made his decision right about here, and where his receiver, his target is in comparison to the coverage versus when the ball arrives. Amazing. It's amazing for the guys that throw into tight windows, anticipate windows opening and closing. Carson Beck doesn't do a lot of that, though. A lot of check downs. But he could not save a team that's a different team. If it's a different, you put him on Ole Miss, and his numbers probably get better, but Ole Miss goes in the tank. Figuratively, they're not going to be a 4-8 team. They're still going to be really good with Carson Beck at quarterback, but no. Yeah, I think I'm going to let the final comment go, though. I can't appreciate that Elvis Presley knowledge there. I watched 1977 Elvis at certain times. That's not my, pardon the pun, my diet of Elvis consumption is 1977. No, you can't do that. It's not good for my it's not good for my vibe of what he brought to the table. All right, Adam stopping by. Adam, what's going on?
Hey, Mark, how you doing tonight?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good. I just have a couple of comments. I'll be brief. And I think it's important to understand that everybody is missing the story about Miami and Ole Miss. This is a story about romance, okay? Just like the Sharon Moore story was about romance, this is about romance. In 2025, Hannah Cavender broke up with Carson Beck because he was unfaithful, he was arrogant, and had a huge ego. She said he was very mean to people, would flip off people at bars. This is not the character of a quarterback that is going to lead its team to a national championship. It's the character of a quarterback that's going to be checking down consistently and trying to be a good game manager. It's not going to work against Ole Miss because here's the thing. Miami has a great defensive front, certainly. But Trinidad Chambliss is a mobile quarterback, okay? They're going to go up tempo. They have the ability to make plays under pressure and when the play breaks down. And, of course, they have Kawan Lacey, who is not only great vertically but laterally. In my view, they are going to use these approaches to wear down the Miami defense. And by the fourth quarter, that defensive front will be tired. And I think Ole Miss wins the game 27-21, but it could be worse than that. It could be 34-21. But Beck is not the person who's going to lead them to a victory or the national championship. And if you have any doubts about that, ask Hannah Cavender.
Well, I got to say that before your call, Adam, I did not know the name Hannah Canaver. Is that her name?
Hannah Cavender.
Hannah Cavender. I knew that Carson Beck had a girlfriend and that she was talked about prominently during his transfer portal decision. I do know that, but I never came across her name. I don't know what she looks like. I don't know if like she is to be celebrated physically or not. Yeah, I don't know anything about that in particular. But
Irrelevant.
He obviously
irrelevant.
Or I should say he apparently cheated on her.
Yeah, and what I noticed about her comments was she talked about his arrogance and his ego. And when you want to win a national championship and you want to play against Ole Miss or maybe Indiana, you got to have what's called humility. That's part of the intangibles that you need to be successful. This guy doesn't have it, and I saw it at Georgia, and I think that he's the reason why Miami will not score enough points to beat Ole Miss. And when you couple that with the fact that Ole Miss's offense is not Ohio State's offense, you don't have Julian Sand going back there and sitting in the pocket. You have a quarterback that is mobile, that when the play breaks down, he can still make plays. That's going to go up tempo. And you have a running back that is going to pound that Miami defensive front. Miami will be successful at first. Miami will probably have the lead at halftime. But I do believe Ole Miss will wear them down and win by a touchdown late in the fourth quarter.
And we're going to believe her character assessment of Carson Beck.
Yes, because she dated him and has intimate knowledge of him. You know, it's kind of like Carson Beck is like the 1977 Elvis, whereas Ole Miss is the 1968
I wish you would stop with
special.
the comparisons between Carson Beck and Elvis Presley.
It's very valid.
Oh, you're going with Chambliss is the 1968 comeback version of Elvis.
That's correct. Yes, that's correct.
And for those of you who have not seen that, you're going to see some of the best rock and roll performance you will ever see. Yes, we're all over the place on this. On
If
Elvis
I Can Dream.
technology.
Ole Miss will be playing If I Can Dream while the gorgeous girls of the Grove sit there and say, wow, we're in a national championship. Last thing I'll say is on Oregon, Indiana. A lot of discussion about this game, but this game, in my view, after what happened in Eugene, comes down to the trenches. And both the offensive and defensive lines of Indiana dominated Oregon in the trenches I don't see that changing. So I see an Indiana Ole Miss national championship with Indiana ultimately winning the national championship, and deservedly so, with a great quarterback and Fernando Mendoza and a complete team.
I am going to reverse your Miami Ole Miss scenario and say that Ole Miss will probably be leading at halftime, and Miami's going to wear them down.
Okay. Well, it's good to have disagreement, and one of us will be proven correct. But as far as Elvis goes, once again, I think Ole Miss is the comeback special, and I think Beck is kind of the can't help falling in love in Indianapolis in June of 1977. But hey,
Wow.
who knows?
Well done.
Great seeing you as always, and thanks for my ridiculous humor, for tolerating my ridiculous humor. Have a great night.
Thank you, Adam. Appreciate your contributions, sir. We always appreciate Adam stopping by. Adam, for however long he has joined us here at the Voice of College Football from day one that I can remember. Well, first I remember Adam joining us in the chat during the USC shows with some snide remarks just in the chat. And then obviously once we got him cranked up on these call-in shows, Adam has always brought some unusual insight. And I say that with all admiration. I'm not saying that in a condescending way. About his insight and his perspective and his proposals. They're insightful. They're intriguing. Absolutely. Jim, thank you for keeping me around for another hour. I appreciate that, sir. That's very nice of you. And please like and subscribe, folks. The like button is the way that YouTube determines whether people like the video. Therefore, they will take this live stream, more so the videos, I have to admit, based on what I know, more so the videos than the actual live streams, and they will push that out into traffic. And we've got 3 more football games this season, the last being the national championship, and then we will all gather together to talk about the future of the channel, and I have much to say about that. I might be sitting here for like 10 hours, and I'm sure I'll have about 3 of you still awake at that point. All right, let's keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football. The other thought I had concerning what Adam brought to the forefront, and I know nothing, zero, about Carson Beck and his girlfriend, other than what I stated that at the time that Carson Beck was making his decision and moving to another team from Georgia, I knew that a relationship had something to do with it. Wouldn't it be nice if we actually had some level of decorum between two people and in relationships where we didn't go on social media or go to the media itself and talk about people? That would be nice. If we kept private matters private, that would be good. That would be good. And I also think of that since Adam brought up my guy Elvis. Way too much brought to the forefront about him that is simply hearsay. All right, Anthony's stopping by to talk some college football. Anthony, how you doing?
Hey, Mark, I want to push back on Adam.
Okay.
What he brought up with Carson and Hannah has nothing to do with football whatsoever. This is what I hate about fans who don't understand. Like, relationships don't work out. I think all that, what she said to the media was just emotional stuff that she was still getting over it was a heat of the moment thing. Like, and she's the same age as Carson. They're 20-year-old kids, like 23-year-old kids that make stupid comments. And people honestly need to stop bringing that crap up. That pisses me off as a Hurricanes fan, that they're bringing up stuff that doesn't have to do with football whatsoever. Like, and honestly, I like Trinidad. He's a good quarterback. I feel the national media is hyping the kid up a little bit too much. At best, to me, he's just a more athletic version of Kevin Jennings from SMU.
More athletic version than Kevin Jennings. So what would you like Trinidad Chablis to show you that he has not, to show you that
I
he's an
need
elite
to see if he can actually pat, to be honest, the only reason why SMU beat Miami was because we forced. He beat us in the pocket, and I don't think a guy like Trinidad can do that consistently because he can't. Kevin Jennings is a little bit taller than he is. Correct? Like, isn't Kevin Jennings like 6'2" or something like that? Trinidad's the only. I think he can't see over. If you force him to be in the pocket, he can't see over the offensive line. He would have to back up way too much to see over the line. That's why they have to do all these bootlegs and stuff with Ole Miss, because his limitations height wise prevent him see over for. If he has to drop back, he can't see over the line. He's only 5'11".
I heard Tom Brady address this, not specifically with Chambliss, but I heard him talk about this just the other day. And it was very interesting to hear him talk about guys like Drew Brees, who obviously turned out to be one of the greatest quarterbacks in the history of the NFL, but he had to overcome a height disadvantage and how much he worked on that early in his career in the NFL, in particular, because it came to light more transitioning from college, where he had to really get on the balls of his feet, throw the ball, throw it with a higher, obviously, arm angle, arm plane. And again, just, Brady was doing a great job of explaining. And you would think, man, a guy's got to kind of reinvent himself at that level. And maybe that's why Drew Brees got
that's why I'm saying Drew Brees is the exception to the rule.
Well, sure, absolutely. And guys like Kyler Murray and Baker Mayfield, they're exceptions. And Kyler Murray's a different cat because he can move so quick. It's a disadvantage. You're right. But it's not impossible to overcome, especially at this level, because he's already done it against an SEC schedule.
Yeah, no, and I like Georgia's defense, but Miami's. Do you agree with me? Miami's defense is a whole different animal compared to Georgia's defense.
Totally agree.
And Joe Thomas actually broke this down. He's an offensive lineman himself, a Hall of Fame offensive lineman. He actually said this, breaking down the way Miami plays. He says it's unnatural how Miami plays their defensive line. He says, why not? The way Philadelphia, the Eagles play the wide nine is hard enough, but with how Miami plays their defensive line, it's even harder because they play with 2 to 3 yards of depth off the offensive line, off the line of scrimmage, because they're creating more momentum coming off. Like when you look at Bain and Mesidor, they're not, because when you're an offensive lineman, aren't you taught immediate contact instead of hesitation, correct? Naturally, throughout high school. Do you understand my question?
I don't understand your last point. When you talk about contact versus...
No, because with Miami, they don't play a traditional wide nine like you see with the Eagles, where the Eagles... They still played directly on the line of scrimmage. They just had a ton of room between the each position on the defensive line. What Miami does, outside of not just having the space between the defensive tackles, they also have depth with all four positions. The tackles are playing 2 to 3 yards off. So are the defensive linemen. And Joe Thomas said that's not natural. How offensive linemen are taught is immediate contact to where they don't have to think and stuff like that. And Miami, with the amount of hesitation Miami creates, it's not natural for a offensive tackle or guards to think that much because the amount of space Miami creates. And I don't think the offensive line for Ole Miss is going to be able to handle that. And the physicality is not they're not a physical team. They're very finesse. Do you agree? When you watch Ole Miss,
Oh,
they're very
absolutely. Miami has a significant advantage physically. Yes. And back to your point about Miami defensively up front playing off the line of scrimmage. I got to admit, I've never noticed that. I've watched a lot of Miami football. I've not noticed that their defensive tackles are playing off the line. That sounds like a flex defense.
Yes,
Tom
a flex
Landry
defense.
Tom
Like,
Landry
it's a
invented
flex.
that in the 1950s. Basically, so you can read and react. And yeah, the offensive line, to keep the offensive line off and not engage with the defensive linemen to where they can read and react. And the only
And
place
also,
that hurts you-
Miami adds on top of that, they add slants and rifles, because if you actually watch some of Miami's defensive line play, Jason Taylor has sometimes the defensive ends looping around the defensive tackle to play off the inside shoulder of the guard and center and stuff like that.
Well,
yeah,
that is interesting. I'll be looking out for that tomorrow night.
And you also need to pay attention what the Trinidad likes to run out of the pocket. Once those defensive ends vacate, the DB, whatever DBs in that area and the linebacker, the weak side linebacker actually picks up the vacated area. So there's not really an open space for Chambliss to run like he did with Georgia and stuff like that. People need to watch Miami games, and they don't. Miami has a non-natural defensive. The way they play their defensive line is not like a normal way how the offensive line is taught to play them and stuff like that. So, I think Miami's tempo is going to affect Ole Miss more than Ole Miss's tempo, because Ole Miss tempo honestly can backfire on them because they can get 3 and outs a lot faster than Miami. Do you agree? Because they're throwing so many plays at once.
You're saying Ole Miss's defense?
No, their offense, the tempo they play on do you believe the tempo of Miami actually hurts the defense for Ole Miss more than the tempo for Ole Miss hurts Miami's defense? Is what I'm asking.
First of all, I think Miami's tempo on offense helps its own defense rest. And then I got to think that Miami's tempo, not necessarily the tempo, but the physicality of the offensive line and the weight and the massiveness of the offensive line and the technique and everything and how much they like to run the ball wears on the opposing defense.
And Mark, I have a question for you. Where does this narrative that Carson can't come back from big deficits? He did it against Alabama during the regular season, and he's done it multiple times in SEC championships. It's like people don't. Is that just revisionist history because of what happened last year at Georgia, that they forget that Carson has had multiple big deficits that he's came back from?
So yeah, they were down 28-0 to Alabama, and they came back and almost won that game 2 years ago. What other games are you talking about that he had a comeback?
I thought he came back to win on SEC championship one year.
No, he does not have an SEC championship as the starting quarterback.
Am I thinking of Stetson Bennett? Maybe am I mixing him and Stetson? Maybe.
Yeah. So Stetson Bennett's teams lost to Alabama in 2021. And then they blew out LSU in 2022. Now, Carson Beck's 2023 team was undefeated and lost to Alabama in the SEC championship game. And then obviously he got hurt just before halftime against Texas in the next season's national or SEC championship game that they eventually won with Gunnar Stockton at quarterback.
Yeah, no, and I feel, like I said before, I feel that people, casual casual fans of Miami football don't watch all the games and don't realize that Miami actually shut down other mobile quarterbacks where they haven't performed well against Miami's defense. Byron Brown, Kevin Jennings, like I just said, he beat us in the pocket. But Adam, that defense of Georgia had a whole bunch of injuries. Are you forgetting that? They were missing players because of injury. Miami's defense is fully healthy. And I don't think he can pull another magic out of the hat again against Miami's defense. Miami's defense is way better than Georgia. Do you agree, Mark?
Yes, I do. I think that Georgia's defense got off to a rough start this year. They got torn up by Tennessee and Ole Miss. May have had another game in there that I'm not thinking of where they didn't perform well. Then they got it together, obviously, the last 3 drives against Ole Miss and played well, held Georgia Tech to a touchdown, held Alabama to a touchdown.
Outside of Eccles, is their defensive line very small?
Georgia's?
No, outside I'm talking about Ole Miss. Ole Miss. Outside of Eccles, is the majority of their defensive line very, very small?
Well, I can't necessarily speak to that. I will say that since Lane Kiffin has been the coach at Ole Miss, and because of what he wants to do, he wants an athletic team overall, that Ole Miss has been slightly undersized for an SEC team since he's been there. Even when he's gotten to the place where he has recruited the kind of players that he's wanted a very quick, agile team.
And that doesn't always work. Like in the play with Chambliss, it can work because he can pull rabbits like at the right time. But against certain teams, I don't think he can. Like if they make it to the national championship, which I don't think they do, I don't think they can do that against Oregon or Indiana.
No, there's a reason that Ole Miss is a pretty heavy underdog to win the national championship. They've got the longest odds by far. And I think much of that has to do with the coaching situation.
And Miami's run defense is one of the top. I don't think Lacey or Chambliss is going to. That's what I'm saying. I think Miami's going to force him to stay in the pocket. And he's if you force him inside to stay in the structure of a pocket, he's very pedestrian. And I think Miami's because Ruben Bain him and Mesidor set the edge very well. And if you have defensive ends that can set the edge very well against a mobile quarterback, where are they going to run?
Answer this question for me, Anthony. Who do you root for?
Miami.
Okay. All right. I'm not discounting your analysis. You're obviously
and I'm not basing my analysis on just me watching Miami games. This is Hall of Fame offensive lineman saying this too. Joe Thomas actually said this, and he watched some of Miami's games, and he even said that himself, that the way Miami teaches their defensive line to play is not natural for an offensive lineman guard all the way through, because they're taught to immediate contact right away, like where they have to have immediate hands on the player and stuff like that. And Miami's defensive line is off the line of scrimmage 3 or 4 yards, 2 to 3 yards, sometimes 4, where they have momentum where it has to force the guy to think. And Joe Thomas even said that.
And the longer the college football season gets, the more it's about who's playing right at the right time and less about who was the best team for the entirety of the season. And Miami's just a hot football team, and they've pulled it together.
Do you feel, am I just being a Miami homer when I say that line is disrespectful, 3.5 points?
Well, I don't think it's disrespectful. I think that term is thrown around way too much. Vegas is not trying to disrespect anyone. They're trying to make money. I think that Miami should be a heavier favorite than 3.5 points. I would put the line more like 6.5.
No, I think 9.5 would be. They did it for Ohio. They did it to Ohio State, but I think the media in Vegas still has this. The Vegas doesn't really like Miami in general.
Well, Vegas also loves the SEC, and I believe that Ole Miss is the first underdog out of the SEC this year. Everybody else has been a favorite that's played a postseason game for the SEC. And we know what the record
and Mark,
is there.
and you're honest, between Oregon, if Miami makes it to the national championship,
Yes.
who is a better matchup, Oregon or Indiana?
Miami would want to play Oregon.
Because Indiana is almost a carbon copy of Miami.
Well, they are, and they're just a sounder football team with a better head coach. I don't think there's a huge disparity between Indiana and Oregon at all. I think that line is pretty accurate. Indiana did outplay them decidedly on the road at Oregon earlier this season. And we'll see if Oregon's able to handle their pass rush better than they were the first time, because that was the difference in that game, much like the Ohio State-Miami game. It was because Indiana's pass rush just overwhelmed Oregon's offensive line.
And am I being harsh when I say the offense for Oregon is too gimmicky? Like very gimmicky and like motion orient, like they use way too much motion and stuff like that, or is that an accurate analysis?
I can't really answer that because I do think that Oregon gets knocked a little bit by reputation. I don't know that Oregon is the Oregon of Chip Kelly. I don't think that they run an offense that is that much different than everybody else or the majority of college football anymore, like they did in the early 2010s when Chip Kelly was running an offense. It was, you talk about Ole Miss possibly having a light defensive line. Obviously, Oregon, it was in vogue for them to have a light offensive line so that they could pull and they could get out in space and they could run the zone.
Yeah, and I think these offenses, like certain offenses in college, like Lane Kiffin and Chip Kelly's offense, don't translate. Like the players don't seem to translate well to the NFL because of their size and the scheme that they're coming from and stuff like that. I hate when people bring up Cam Newton and Gus Malzahn. Cam was a one-of-one type of player. Like, and that scheme that Gus Malzahn, maybe there were certain aspects that the coach that coached in Carolina was running already and stuff like that. So I hate when people bring up comparing these two offenses for Oregon and to that. It was completely different. Like, where does that come from? Is it just people don't understand football, or is that just like not understanding what schemes are?
I think most people just regurgitate what they hear. So
is Miami the lowest odds, or are they?
No, so we've got the odds from FanDuel right here. So Indiana is the best odds. They are a near odds-on favorite. They're still a bit of an underdog against the field, but not by much. So if folks, you don't understand these numbers, it's that if you lay $100 on Indiana to win the national championship, and they do, you would win 126. If they don't, you obviously lose your $100. With Oregon, you would win $315 off a $100 bet. Miami's at plus 340. And then Ole Miss is a heavy underdog at plus 670.
So that means a person would win $770, right?
670.
670.
Well,
plus the 100 that they put down. I'm saying
they give 100, they get 770 back. They net 670.
So Miami would win 440. Whoever bets money on Miami.
Yes,
correct.
That's
am I doing that? Is my math correct, or am I off?
Well, your math is correct, but it's much simpler just to know that you would win $340.
Okay. Okay.
You'd
for
have to pay 100 to make the bet. Then you get 440 back.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on, Mark. And I liked having a back and forth with Adam in the chat because he was disagreeing with me, but I understand where he's coming from. Is he an Ole Miss fan?
Adam's a USC fan.
Okay.
Well, Adam, you need to talk to Adam to really narrow down his fandom. So I shouldn't even say that necessarily.
Thanks for having me on, Mark.
Well, Anthony, you've been watching us for a long time, so we appreciate you calling.
Okay, have a good night.
Thanks, Anthony. Take care. So our guy Anthony brings some good insights to it. I had never noticed that Miami's defensive line plays back off the line of scrimmage any more than any other defensive front. And of course, I made the connection to Tom Landry's flex defense because that was his philosophy that he would back up his defensive linemen. Therefore, the offensive linemen couldn't engage with them. They'd have to, and therefore they could move before they could be engaged and made and get engaged by an offensive lineman. So if you think about that, when there's space there, then the offensive lineman, typically being a bit slower than the defensive lineman, can't get out there and get to him, as opposed to the guys lined up nose to nose with you. And as soon as the offensive line comes off the ball, then the bigger, stronger offensive lineman can get a hold of the defensive lineman and do what they want with them. And then that also allowed the defensive lineman to read the play, to be able to have that yard to look at the scheme, the blocking scheme, and to give it a quick flash look, excuse me, as soon as the ball was snapped and diagnose the play. Now you give up yardage that way. You more or less contain the run, then you shoot gaps and make plays behind the line of scrimmage. You more or less contain the run and you stop big running plays or even successful running plays. All right. You can listen to the Voice of College Football Show, the College Football Show. It's on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, a number of other audio platforms. So keep that in mind that you can download this show the next day or any of the shows that we provide here on the main channel. And really all of our channels across the board and all of our live streams, the team-specific ones. Of course, we do have a Miami show each and every week. 3 of them, in fact, Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday on the Miami channel. We've got an Indiana show every Tuesday at 8 Eastern time. We've got an Oregon show every week. We do not have an Ole Miss show anymore, but we've got the other 3 teams covered each and every week. So you can catch the audio from any of the team channels on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, and other audio platforms. So please check it out. If you do not want to look at me, if you just want to hear the conversation, you can download us off of those audio platforms. Also, the College Football Show Late Night Edition is brought to you by FanDuel. And again, once we've got the odds there, and I think they make sense, the winner of the Indiana-Oregon game will be a favorite against Miami and or Ole Miss. Ole Miss is the heavy underdog in this situation. Indiana plus 126, Oregon plus 315. Again, if you lay down $100 on any of these bets, you get back the money that you see right there. That is your net return. Miami at plus 340 and Ole Miss at plus 570. And somebody in the chat was begging me to get my glasses. I don't know where they are. And the only time I wear my contacts is when I go out. All right. Oh, yeah. I do not want to wish the college football season away, but I am anxious to get in front of all of you after the season because there's so much I want to tell you, so much I want to get back from you in response to hopefully make this a better channel, a better product, better content moving forward. You can bet that once we hit the off season, I'm going to present coaches rankings, program rankings. I'm going to have a 2025 rankings, one, not to top 25, but 1 through 136. I'm going to start to dive into the transfer portal in terms of making sense of all of that, the winners, the losers of the transfer portal. I believe at one point late in the season or just into the off season, once we started to have coaches fired, that we had coaches hirings ranked. I may be confusing seasons, but we've got national championships to sort out from yesteryear, all sorts of things to determine for sure. And yeah, it's always been our aim to make this the best product in college football. And I apologize because we have not had the resources or the time to really put forward to that. I'm only working like 100 hours a week. It used to be like 120. So all kidding aside, yes, my focus has been elsewhere. All right, certainly we're going to honor Adam and Jim and Adam and Jim. The Voice of College Football show late night is brought to you by Adam and Jim. So without any callers and without me really prepared to delve into the transfer portal or anything else, this is what we're going to do. And again, we will stay on here as late as you would like us tonight. However, our guys, Adam and Jim, have secured a final half hour here tonight. What we can do is we can tack that on to get us started on Thursday night, make that a 90-minute show post-game, and I'll be here after Miami and Ole Miss conclude. I may do a instant analysis video because the instant analysis videos do better than the live streams. And so give me some grace period there of about 20 minutes to knock that out, get that posted, and be on here. And again, if somebody wants to call and keep this thing going, then I'm certainly here. Otherwise, we will tack this half hour onto tomorrow night, do 90 minutes with you to start. Elsewhere in the chat, Dylan Raiola to Oregon, or Anthony Calandria, the UNLV quarterback, formerly of Virginia. That's where I first caught him. I like Anthony Calandria. He's a bit of a Fernando Mendoza type, possibly going. Mark's picks are singular. Love that about this channel. And again, I love football. I love watching football. I have over the last, really ever since the bowl season started, because I got behind, I was visiting my kids and spending time with them and really not watching football for the week after Christmas. But then I spent a heck of a lot of time here ripping through bowl games, 3-4 days later. So I love the product on the field. This is the reason I do this, first and foremost, is because I love to watch football. I'm a lazy dude that has watched football his whole life and sat on couches since I was 8 years old watching football. Also love to play football. If somebody could present me a 55 and over flag football league, I would play in that, because I was playing flag football up until about 10 years ago. So I would do that. So I love football. I also love the tradition. I love the history. I love the pageantry. I love the structure of the game. I love the issues. I don't love what's going on with it and what has happened the last 5 years. But when I say the structure, I love the conference breakdowns, comparisons, scheduling comparisons and breakdowns, all of those things. So I am going to press into, as I have in the past, this off season, presenting that type of content. And as long as it's fairly well received, I will continue it. Unfortunately, much of that kind of content takes a lot of time to present and put together. And I would also like to have better graphics to present that, because I think that that would add much to it as well. But at the very least, I'm going to offer you a final rankings 1 through 136, coaches rankings, program rankings, and we'll size up the positions leading into next season regarding who stayed, who went where, and do as much of that as possible. And if you have any requests about anything in particular, I would also love to really look at Kurt Signetti and his success and try to put it in some type of historical perspective. Now, the bottom line is that it's unprecedented, so that would be a short video, but I could do a little bit more justice to it than that. So Cyhawk is saying, compare and contrast conferences, the SEC versus the Big Ten versus the ACC. Well, I am going to rank the conferences. I do that every off season. I go through all the results. I put them into context. I give you the hard, cold reality, the facts, the results, but then I put it into context as well and rank the conferences. There's more nuance to it beyond that. And this is, Cyhawk, you're getting to the beauty of the sport that's being downgraded and is being lost, is the fabric of the sport is tied to the conferences, and the conferences being so different that we grew up with a certain vibe, a certain feel, a certain brand of football, a certain style, certain music, certain clothes, certain cultural aspects to Big Ten football versus SEC football versus Pac-10 football versus the Big 12 or the Big 8 at the time versus the ACC, that they all had unique qualities to them. And those qualities have been largely lost, not completely, but largely lost when you've got USC and Oregon and Rutgers and Maryland playing in a conference that is supposed to be in the Midwest and the upper Midwest. And when the Big 12 was once kind of the heartland of America, and I still consider that to be the core of the conference, Iowa State, Oklahoma State, Kansas, and then down into Texas. But Cincinnati, you've got an Orlando school, Orlando, Florida, in the Big 12. Nothing speaks Big 12 football like UCF playing Arizona State. Nothing speaks Big 10 football like Washington playing Rutgers. And then, of course, in the ACC, going way back, pre-Miami, Boston College, Syracuse, etc., the ACC was Tobacco Road, the Carolinas. Most of the schools in the ACC were right there. Like more than half the conference resided in North Carolina. North Carolina, NC State, Wake, Duke. You had a 17 conference at one point in the ACC, and 4 of them were in North Carolina. And NC State, and Virginia, and Maryland at the time. And I'm okay with Virginia Tech coming in, Louisville to a certain extent. But then it just keeps going and going and going. And now we've got Cal and Stanford and SMU. So, if anything, the SEC has been the conference that has been the most true to its footprint. I do not believe that Oklahoma and Texas belong in the SEC, belong in a traditional SEC, but at least the SEC has stayed a contiguous group of states, if nothing else. And outside of Missouri, Oklahoma, and Texas, and maybe some real old school folks would say Arkansas doesn't belong, the SEC has generally stayed within its footprint. Yeah, that great Big 12 matchup. Arizona State, West Virginia. All right. So Kai's World of Sports 5430. I do rank all the coaches. And I will do that once again. I've done that every off season, probably for 6 or 7 years. So I will rank all the P4 coaches. You can, in fact, if you want me to look bad, because obviously things change, just put in coaches rankings in the search bar on this channel and you will see previous year's coaches rankings. I will tell you this about last year. I remember that I ranked Scott Frost as the worst coach in college football. And I'm really not going to move off of that ranking, I don't believe. Let me see if I can find last year's coaches rankings. And we're going to revisit all the national championships. And I say all this to a certain caveat that I have to be compensated for this. And that has been one of our channel challenges to what we're doing, is that there has to be some level of compensation. I don't have to make $1 million, but I have largely had to abandon my work here to make a buck. Let me find our coaches rankings. I can't find them. What's this? Power ranking. Oh, I should probably power rank all the conferences as well. All right, I'm not finding that. What I am finding, top 25 teams. I wonder if it was on here. I think I put it in a different document and I don't remember the, unfortunately, I don't remember what I called it. I understand this is fascinating. Program. Oh, here we go. This was last year's. Let's see what's changed here. These were my program rankings after last season. So those are the program rankings. And again, not the team rankings for 2024, but my view of the entire program, not historically, but where the program stood after the 2024 season. And in parentheses, where I had that program ranked the year before. Ohio State, Georgia, Texas, Oregon. None of these are really going to change much. I'm going to have to make a judgment call on Michigan to a certain extent, but I would not expect that to change too much. Now, if Sharon Moore was still around, it probably dropped considerably, maybe 5 spots. Notre Dame, Penn State's an outlier. I will have to think about. I do believe in Matt Campbell. Clemson has to take a tumble. LSU, let's wait and see. But with Lane Kiffin in play, I think they should probably maintain that program ranking. Ole Miss, Tennessee, really not any considerable changes here. Tennessee, Texas A&M. Obviously, Miami is going to take a large move up. I had Miami going into this season in terms of a program at number 21. So they're going to vault past Kansas State, Louisville, Auburn, Florida, Oklahoma, Missouri, USC, Texas A&M, Tennessee, and then I don't know if they're going to pass anyone else. North Carolina is going to take a dive. South Carolina is going to take a dive. Florida State's going to take a dive. Utah, new head coach, Bud coming off a nice season, but brand new head coach. And Luke Fickell's trying to save Wisconsin, which was number 22 the year before, dropped to 34. Obviously, had a horrendous season, but played better in November, and Luke Fickell's making some moves. Program rankings for this season. So let's let the season play out first. And what I'm going to do, Trojan Fight, because I don't want people to confuse the two, is right when the season's over, hopefully the next day, because I should start ranking these teams right now, because obviously everybody's done except for 4 teams. So it's pretty much cut and dry to rank all the teams for 2025. So I'll come on with that after the season's over, a day or two after the national championship game, my 1 through 136 for the season. And then I like to wait a few months because I want to separate the two and then come out with program rankings, because I don't want to confuse people that don't differentiate between individual teams and programs. 2 different things. They're very much related, but they're 2 different things. So yeah, I love doing this stuff. So hopefully you love to watch it, and hopefully we'll have enough people here watching it that I can continue to do it. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. We've got a big semifinal game tomorrow night, of course, at the Fiesta Bowl with Miami taking on Ole Miss. I will be here after the game to take your calls, your comments, your questions. I appreciate the support. Please hit the like button on your way out. This is the College Football Show presented by FanDuel, and we will see you on Thursday night.